He is the head of unit for impact analysis and strategic intelligence since January 2010. He started with TEKE, which is a Finnish funding agency for technology and innovation, as a director of regional networks at TEKES in September 2007. The regional networks consist of 14 technology development departments all over in Finland. One of his most important future challenges is to coordinate the synchronizing the distinctive regional strategies together and with the one of TEKES. He has a PhD degree in industrial engineering and management and a master's degree in economics. He has published several articles in international journals and edited academic books. The most recent articles are related to technology management and economic forecasting. I would pass the mic to Dr. Raine Hermans.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to thank the Korea Economic Daily, Council of National Competitiveness, and Chamber of Commerce and Industry for the kind invitation. I am pleased and honored to be here as a speaker in this forum. I'm going to give an overview of competitiveness in Finland, and I'm going to concentrate on one of the most important factors behind competitiveness, and that is innovative activity. So, as you can see, based on productivity growth, Finland has been able to increase industrial production and gross domestic production faster than OECD countries on average. And which are the industries behind on this development? Mainly we can separate this into four distinctive industrial classes. First, we have, even globally speaking, a big forest cluster. And we have paper and pulp industry, which produces almost 20% of our merchandise exports. We have chemical industry focusing on providing intermediate inputs for the paper and pulp industry, and also machinery industry producing equipment and machinery for this cluster. Machinery industry also includes shipbuilding, as mentioned here before, and there is nowadays Norwegian-owned Kværner as a main player. I'd like to just give you one detailed example that we also have automotive industry, a pretty tiny one, but still we have an assembly line of Porsche Boxsters. So that is kind of a very highly specialized niche. Third, we have a big electronics industry. That's driven by Nokia company, which produces cell phones and network equipments. And also we have some highly differentiated niche players in the instruments industry. For example, we have a Polar company which produces sports equipments, for example, heart rate measurement equipments in sports. And then of course, we have services industry, which produces almost 70% of our GDP, including software programming and other services. I'd like to mention that biotechnology has been in a great boom recently in Finland. We have invested heavily in especially drug development, diagnostics, but unfortunately we don't have any big successes yet. We didn't create a new Nokia in pharmaceutical industry yet, but surprisingly, we have used biotechnologies in other traditional industries. For example, there are some mining solutions that utilize bacteria to separate valuable metals from stone material and even from gravel. Speaking about global competitiveness index, our main strengths seem to be related to institutions, infrastructure, macroeconomic stability, health and primary education, and higher education. And to give you an example, Google just purchased an old paper and pulp mill, a plant, to provide services to larger regions in Russia, for example. It is based close to a Russian border. And interestingly enough, one reason was, of course, this good infrastructure and institutions which are reliable, but also climate. They can save huge amounts of money that they don't have to cool down the server room so much as anywhere else in the world. But this is true. And or let's take a look. And of course, as you can see, market size is kind of a negative thing because we have only 5.5 million people population. So you can imagine that we don't have kind of test market or domestic market that we could utilize in the sense that many bigger nations, as even Korea, can do. Income inequality is really kind of important issue for us because we call our system as Scandinavian welfare state system, and that means that we have progressive tax rates. We try to subsidize all the people that are not able to earn their own money for a reason or another. And one thing behind this kind of evolution that intergenerational and generational income elasticity is low. That is to say that if there is rich parents, or if there is poor parents, their children can become richer in Finland easily because our education system utilizes all the resources, all the talents. Anybody who have talent can be educated to the highest level. This is very important feature behind also the competitiveness and innovative activity in Finland. And because we are a small country, I'd like to share with you in detail that Nokia company leaders in the first stage, they used to be high school mates. So we have a small country, everybody knows each other. And for them it was really easy to deal with things and make deals without papers and formal contracts. Research and development investments in some countries here, as you can see, the red line denotes the development of Finland. Finland has increased the research and investments significantly from the beginning of 90s. It used to be in the middle class of these countries in comparison, and nowadays we are in top 5. This figure tells the same principle by certain amounts of euros spent. And as you can see, all the sectors, enterprises, universities, and other public research have increased their spending on research and development. And again, we can ask that what have this produced? As you can see, also in context of this technology and industry outlook, we can see that there are many strengths, for example, science and engineering degrees, researcher employment. We are very research-oriented nation, you can say. If you want to search for any weaknesses, maybe we can raise venture capital, which is 18% below OECD average, and also services research and development. There is one technical matter regarding services research and development, and that is that usually our manufacturing companies, they also conduct some service research and development. They provide services to their customer, after sales services, or kind of total solutions, and this kind of research and development are counted as industrial manufacturing research and development. So this is a tricky thing to measure these things. And then maybe we can also find that which I think is extremely important in this context is that innovation collaboration is 52% above the OECD average. So the whole idea, as I will show you later, is to get companies and the academia to collaborate with each other. And here, I think this is not updated figures, but still, as you can see, Scandinavian countries are fairly high in these innovation index comparisons. What is behind of this kind of figures? To be honest, we must say that Nokia conducts nearly half of business research and development in Finland, 46-47%. This is really big figure for any country. A single company constitutes this kind of share of innovative activity. In the year 2000, Nokia's contribution to the GDP growth was about 1.5 percentage points. And when our GDP growth that year was 6%, you can imagine that almost 1/4 of the growth was impacted by one single company again. If you think where Nokia came from, the fact is that Nokia's GSM software was produced by state-owned research institute. It was sold to Nokia by 100,000 euros in the end of 70s. That was one thing, and then another thing was that the state and Tekes in the first years in the 80s invested heavily, almost 40% of the total investments to this single company. So Tekes really carried a high risk, but it paid back. Here I just want to share you some details that how this innovation process is carried on in Finland. If you put a line, everything that starts from the basic research is applied somewhere and then conducted further by business research and development, and then finally marketed to the global markets, then you can see that research and development activities at companies, they really cover the whole chain. For instance, Nokia has its own research center which conducts also some basic research. Tekes, the organization that I represent, the Finnish funding agency for technology and innovation, what we do, we differ from many other research and development financiers in that respect that we finance both academic research and business research and development activity. And Academy of Finland is all about funding basic research only. So our main target is to get driver companies and smaller and medium-sized enterprises together to collaborate with research groups and which can apply their new inventions for the industry. Here I just want to provide some more details. We had a great sample of over 4,000 Finnish companies, and interestingly, if you consider companies' innovation process starting from the idea for an innovation and ending up to commercialization, we can see that 36% of these firms received public funding. So I think even internationally speaking, this is pretty high number, and 41% collaborated with universities, 50% collaborated with suppliers and customers, and even 1/3 collaborated with their competitors. So when we are turning to global value networks instead of conventional, traditional value chains, then we can see that in the same time, the companies that we are competing against are also a source of inventions and an important source of knowledge about users, customers, attitudes, behavior, how they use different solutions. So in the modern world, I think that it's very important to collaborate with everybody, try to find new kind of value creation mechanisms, even with competitors. And then if we take a look at how many of these projects really innovated something, then we can see that 13% of the projects was terminated at planning phase. 16% were terminated during the project, and 33% delayed significantly. Unfortunately, this was the case especially in the biotechnology industry. The Ministry of Employment and the Economy released a new national innovation strategy, I guess it was 2 years ago. And there we really focus on the world without borders and try to find systemic approach, because when we have a small country, we have a possibility to really change our system within the country. For example, what we are trying to do now, we are conducting a change regarding healthcare system, how new healthcare applications and technologies could reduce healthcare costs. And this, if we can solve this challenge within Finland, we will have great opportunities to serve the whole globe also. I skip a couple of slides. and we have collaborations all over the world. Okay, maybe I skip this also. Okay, I just tell you something about our own strategy behind innovative activities and in order to raise our competitiveness. Instead of industry-specific choices, we are relying nowadays on the future so-called lead market changes. And we try to provide for our companies foresight signals from all over the world in order to help them to decide in which field they want to be in the future, which are the application areas that they want to get involved in. For instance, instead of saying something about machinery industry, metal industry, we speak about scarce resources, intelligent systems and environments. And this is the systemic change I referred to earlier. So this kind of change cannot be conducted by any single company itself, because this kind of change really requires cross-cutting competencies and technologies. And as I mentioned, for example, biotechnology, when we started funding biotechnology research in the end of the 80s, we heavily focused on healthcare applications. Nowadays, we are more on systems biology, biotechnology applications in energy, environment, and also well-being as well. So this kind of change of attitudes toward future is necessary to be creative and to provide incentives also for small and medium-sized enterprises to change their corporate strategies. We have some challenges, for example, in entrepreneurial activity, and that is something that might be related to risk aversion attitude of the most highly educated people in Finland. And then how we conduct this activity and how we provide, how we organize the so-called TechES programs is that we try to intensify cooperation between public research and private business. And this is the way how we do it. We take our themes and practices and speak with companies. We plan some programs according to these systemic thematic choices. And then nowadays we have 29 ongoing programs with a total volume of 2 billion euros. And this has been a great instrument for getting research groups and industrial actors together. Because this kind of virtual organization really provides chances to create something like a new environment for collaborations, and also it provides a possibility to change, to conduct changes on the way, because this is not a rigid organizational form, it's virtual. So all the companies and research institutes involved in the program, they know they are committed, and the commitment is high level because they want to be a part of it and develop things together, and then they can, if you consider just a small company, small enterprise, it is very difficult to get this kind of networks without any help from outside of the company, because their concern is to get money in and pay salaries next month. It's very hard to take a look at what will happen during the next 5 years or so. So that's where we help those companies. And just to give a short overview of okay, as you can see, our companies really are active in cooperation with universities. And if we just take a snapshot that with which countries do the companies collaborate, you can see that the USA is the main partner, but our neighboring countries and traditionally the closest partners come next: Germany, Great Britain, Sweden, and then other European countries. But in the future, I think that we are extremely interested in increasing collaborations with other countries in East Asia too, even with, or especially with Korea. We are having some common plans with Singapore, I guess, am I right? And collaborations. And I think that this part of the world will provide for both of our countries kind of common ground for the future developments. And one especially important topic is that how can we investigate user orientations and user needs in different segments in different parts of the world. We have the same kind of industrial structure in the sense that, of course, Korea is a bigger country. As mentioned before, you have a large domestic market, but still, both countries, we are relying almost entirely on exports and growth of exports. That's why we cannot rely on our own or domestic trends. We have to rely on the knowledge regarding the growth markets. Traditionally speaking, Finland has been extremely active to export to Russian territory also. So we are figuring out if we can provide some services to act as a gate to Russian markets. We have expertise on that field either. So I wanted to concretize you some details in competitiveness of Finland and some factors behind it, namely innovative activity. And I provided you some details that how we conduct how we provide incentives for companies and research groups to collaborate and increase our competitiveness. Thank you for this opportunity to share these ideas with you.
Thank you, Dr. Hermans. The 5 speakers have done their presentation. I'm not going to summarize, but in fact I cannot summarize simply because I'm not quite familiar with this topic. But to remind you of the topic, to say something, PL-based did talk about the national competitiveness in a global economy, focusing on the case of the United States. And Dr. Cho investigates the factors determining a nation's competitiveness for 67 countries. And Dr. Moon studies industrial competitiveness of countries under investigation. And Dr. Siong gave us the detailed information on the competitiveness of Singapore. And lastly, Dr. Hermans presents the Finnish innovation in terms of research and development, I think. And now it's time for the audience in the floor to ask questions or make some comments or suggestions. If one has questions or suggestions, please raise your hand. Then the mic will be passed to you and briefly identify yourself. Anyone has questions on the floor? Nobody? Everything is clear? No questions, no suggestions?
You know, I might just, can we ask our fellow panelists here? Because we talked a little last night about an interesting question, and you spoke a lot about, Raine had talked about Nokia and how reliant the economy is, and that's got to be a cause of concern going forward to have that much reliance on one company. I don't know, maybe you want to just elaborate a little bit on how Tekes is responding and managing looking forward for what would happen if Nokia at some point is not as dominant a player in Finland.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. You know, you are right. Of course, as you saw, if there is 46% of research and development costs affected by one single company, then we are really relying on that single company. But what we do with Tekes is nowadays that we try to provide new networks for smaller companies to collaborate with Nokia and to get to the global markets with this driver company. In addition to that, we are finding new solutions for example, in the fields of clean energy. As I mentioned, we have a huge forest cluster, and even the paper and pulp industry, they are interested in providing and developing new technologies regarding clean energy, because our wood reserves are relatively big. Also, what we think is that we can provide new kind of platforms, societal platforms. As I mentioned about healthcare system, we are trying to provide new kind of holistic approach to solve problems. Our population is aging. This kind of phenomenon is global in any industrialized countries, except the USA, I guess. So we share the common interest. So this kind of new approaches that we try to put on, because we have relied on technology push for decades, and now what we are searching for is more user-oriented approaches.
Oh, you have any questions? Please identify yourself briefly.
I'm happen to be visiting this place for a short moment, but I heard the talk from Professor Neo about the competitiveness of Singapore. My name is D.S. Kim, working for EI DuPont, multinational company, and we have made quite a few investments in Singapore. So I know about what Singapore government is doing to attract investments from the countries all over the place. I know how the Singaporean government is acting to attract investment, and I call Singaporean government as more of an entrepreneur rather than government officials. I try to convey this message to Korean government about about setting Singapore government as a kind of a role model to copy after. The response from the Korean government in general is that, yeah, but we are talking about different scale, different complexity of managing economy and the politics, and we really cannot do that. I personally don't believe that, but what would be your answer to that?
Say your question again. What is the... Can you repeat your question, the last statement?
My question is, if you're in my shoes, talking to Korean government officials, and the government officials say, hey, you cannot make the comparison on that because we are talking about different complexity of economic and political issues. What would be your answer to that?
I think in a sense they are correct. Singapore and Korea and any two countries are very different. The context is different, the culture is different, the aspiration and the values are different. So the specific practices, I think, whether in Finland or Singapore or any other country, will probably not apply in another country. But what I think we need to do, and what I try to do when I speak to a different country, is to draw from there the thinking and the principles behind what is done. I think that can be generalizable. So the question is, Singapore government officials, you are right, are entrepreneurial, but they need to be, because nobody cares about Singapore. They have to go out to generate interest. Korea is not in the same state. You don't have the same issues. So maybe you don't need to be as entrepreneurial. Maybe you need something else. So it is really that the entrepreneurship, the government entrepreneurship is really for survival and to really put Singapore at least to be of some relevance. So perhaps Korean officials don't have to be so entrepreneurial, but there might be another issue which Korea is trying to achieve, which will require the officials to play a role that's different from other government officials. I think that is how I would approach it. Not to say that you have to be like Singapore, but for what you want to do, how must the government operate differently in order to achieve it, rather than follow the normal public sector model?
Thank you. Singapore is surviving very well.
네, 안녕하세요. 저 한국 청년기업협회 장재환이라고 합니다. 오늘 이 주제에서 방금 말씀하신 그 싱가포르의 문제는 되게 그 싱가포르이 도시국가고 작고 또는 난렵하기 때문에 그런 경쟁력을 가지는데 한국 이상의 이런 영토라든지 인구 이런 크기를 가진 소위 이야기하는 아시아의 네 마리용 이런 나라들은 싱가포르와 같은 그런 어떤 경쟁력을 갖기가 쉽지 않다고 생각합니다. 그 견해를 말씀드렸고요. 그리고 예를 들어서 국내에서 건설업체에서 예를 들어서 사만 기업이든 이런 한 종목만 계속 가지고 65년씩 이렇게 해온 기업들은 어떻게 보면 이렇게 다른 같은 동종의 현대라든지 다른 업체는 이렇게 예를 들어서 문어발식으로 계속 가서 이렇게 성장해 왔습니다. 처음에는 삼성이든 현대든 쌀이라든지 경공업으로 시작했는데 끊임없이 이제 변신하고 이렇게 해서 대기업군으로 간 기업이 있는가 하면은 한 가지 종목만 계속 하는 불만 판 기업들이 경쟁력을 가져야 되는데 또 시대의 흐름이 뒤떨어지다 보면 그게 갖지 못하는 경우가 있습니다. 유럽에도 그런 경우가 많이 있습니다. 우리가 모르는 많은 기업들 중에서 100년 이상 된 기업들이 많은데 세계적으로 많이 알려지지 않는 기업들이 있는가 하면은 그렇지 않고 신생 기업인데도 이렇게 경쟁력을 갖고 시대 변화 조류에 맞아서 이렇게 성장을 한 기업들이 있습니다. 그런 것에 대한 어떤 논평을 듣고 싶습니다.
Dr. Jo, you have something to say?
Perhaps, were you listening? What?
Go ahead.
Perhaps I will answer your question. Indeed, your question is, there are a number of different ways a company can grow into a major company. Some companies concentrate on one industry, such as Hermans Construction Company, that has been in construction business only in the last 67 years, while Hyundai, for example, has started as a construction company, but it has grown into diversified companies and created a sort of group of companies. So indeed, the question you have raised addresses still another dimension of competitiveness. Today, in the morning, we have discussed national competitiveness of a nation among three of us, Bill, Raine, and myself, and also Professor Siong. And then Professor Moon had identified the second dimension of competitiveness, that is industrial competitiveness of industry. Yet you are addressing the third one, that is competitiveness of a company, of a firm. I believe, although we are talking about the same competitiveness, the way in which this competitiveness should be approached should be very different. Take, for example, between national competitiveness and industrial competitiveness, there are fundamental differences. Take, for example, in national competitiveness, employment is a very important issue. Equality or equity or fair income distribution are very important as a criterion in evaluating competitiveness of a nation. But when it comes to competitiveness of industry, perhaps employment is not as an important issue as national competitiveness. Well, income distribution is not